Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast here, live show on draft night as the Timberwolves have made a draft trade. They traded back in tonight's draft. The Wolves, of course, came into the draft with the number 19 pick, and they traded back, picking up a couple of picks along the way in picking up some value, quite frankly. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the Locked On Wolves podcast. And breaking down what the Wolves have done tonight, um, there were the board really fell. We're gonna start here. The board fell about as expected, right? There weren't really any big surprises. Of course, numbers 1 and number 3 in the draft were, maybe flipped from what people expected. But beyond that, many of the players that were expected to go before the Wolves picked at 19 went. So EJ Liddell, the forward, the wing player out of Ohio State, a player who I thought the Timberwolves may take at 19, was on the board. Malachi Branham went just a pick prior to him. There were a lot of guys on the board who might have made sense for the Wolves at 19. And in the moment, the Timberwolves traded back, which is something I predicted on the show here a couple of weeks ago, and also more recently brought up the fact, hey, the Wolves could trade back. They could trade out of the first round because they're in a position they're not looking for that big swing, right? They're not the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're not trying to take, they don't have to try and find the star. They have Anthony Edwards, they have Karl-Anthony Towns. So trading back from 19, picking up 2 additional picks made a ton of sense for Tim Connelly in his first official trade in charge of the Timberwolves, and he did exactly that. He traded from 19 back to 22 and 29, picking up 2 picks for the price of 1. He is sending out, also the Timberwolves are sending out a future second round pick. We don't know exactly when that will fall, but the Wolves had extra second round picks to give up. So the Wolves trade 19 and a future second rounder to Memphis for 22 and 29. And then at 22, the Timberwolves do exactly what a lot of folks thought they might do at 19, which was draft Walker Kessler, the big man out of Auburn. On this show, when I profiled Kessler on my big board, I dropped him down to 20 on my big board. So actually, the Wolves got him at 22, which is, good value if you look at my board. I'm somewhere in the middle on Walker Kessler. There's a lot of people that either didn't want the Wolves to draft him because of some of the peripherals, the limitations offensively, and the limited mobility on the perimeter. We'll get to that here in a minute. There's also people, and obviously the Wolves, as an organization, think that they want to move forward with another big along with Karl-Anthony Towns. That's sliding Towns to the 4, playing him with a rim protection, a big that can protect the rim better than Towns himself can, and better than certainly Naz Reid and Jared Vanderbilt and other bigs on the roster. And that's the thought process behind acquiring a Walker Kessler. The reason why I don't absolutely hate this pick, and it's not what I would have done. I would have drafted EJ Liddell. I probably would have just taken him at 19. Obviously, if I knew that this possibility was on the board, if I could trade back and get him at 22, I would have done that. But it's not what I would have done. However, first I'll talk about why I wouldn't have done this, because Kessler he's not going to start for the Wolves, right? He's going to be a backup 5 for Minnesota. The Wolves have a pretty good backup 5 in Naz Reid, and at least in terms of value, he's an extremely valuable player on his contract and the ability to do the things he does offensively. And so drafting a backup 5, there's a cap on what you can get out of that, right? Karl-Anthony Towns is going to play 32 plus minutes per game. I've talked about this on Locked On Wolves quite a bit. Walker Kessler is not going to play more than 14, 16 minutes per game as his backup if he's his primary backup. And he can probably play with Karl-Anthony Towns, but how many minutes a game are you really going to do that? He's not going to start. You're not going to start Karl-Anthony Towns at the 4 in today's NBA. I just don't think that's a realistic thing you're going to do. So I think there's a cap on what you can do with Kessler. And therefore, I made the case on the show. I don't think that's great asset allocation, right? I think you could pick up a JaVale McGee, a Bismack Biyombo, somebody who can replicate the rim protection, the paint defense that a Walker Kessler can, at a better, essentially better cost benefit, right? And you could take somebody who maybe fits a different need that has a higher ceiling in terms of minutes to be played, that could play a bigger role within the rotation, like an EJ Liddell or some of the other wings that are on the board. And of course, now I'm doing the show, so I don't know exactly what's happened since the Wolves pick, but wings that would have been on the board potentially at 22. And so it's not what I would have done. But here's the good with Kessler. He has a 19% block rate in college, which is insane. There's basically nobody that's done that. I believe like Nerlens Noel, maybe there was maybe one other guy who's in that neighborhood in the last basically 2 decades, since the blocks were tracked in that way, right? So an otherworldly block rate. I don't think there's any reason that we could ignore that. You can't teach length at all. But Kessler's also knows how to use his length. He knows angles. He knows, timing in terms of defense. He does a really good job at angling ball handlers into trouble when they do, in drop coverage, especially, which is, by the way, the Wolves moved away from drop coverage after moving away from David Vanterpool as the defensive coordinator, right? The Wolves played hardly any drop coverage last year. They mixed it in towards the end of the season. And this signals to me that Chris Finch wants to play more of that. Even though the blitz, the high roll pick and roll coverage, or the high wall, pick and roll coverage, the Wolves did so effectively early in the season, was so great for 3/4 of the season. And the Wolves switched okay when they mixed in some switching concepts towards the end of the year. It, Drafting Walker Kessler tells me they don't want to switch when Kessler's on the floor, right? He's not going to be, he's okay on the perimeter. I think he's maybe better in terms of lateral quickness than a lot of people think. If you watch a lot of his games with Auburn, I think he was better laterally, but he's not going to, you can't switch with him on the perimeter, right? So you're either going to be playing high wall and you think he's mobile enough to do that. And I think he can do it. Or you're going to be playing a lot of drop coverage. And you're going to try and avoid getting Karl-Anthony Towns in the pick and roll game if you're playing drop, right? Because Towns does not do a good job in drop coverage. Defensively, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be okay. It just limits the coverages you can play. You can do anything with Karl-Anthony Towns. He's not great in drop, but he's very good in high wall. It helped keep him out of foul trouble at times early in the season. And he also is fairly switchable, more switchable than Walker Kessler is. So that's my concern there. Offensively, he hasn't shown anything beyond about 2 feet. He shot like 20% on jumpers, not 3-pointers, on jumpers. He shot just a couple, 3 dozen jumpers last year at Auburn and was 20% on jump shots. Now, in high school, he apparently shot the 3 a little bit better. I haven't watched high school tape on Walker Kessler, but the numbers apparently were much better. He has a little bit of range on the jumper, depending on how you use him at the NBA level. And the Wolves obviously had him in for a workout. So if they believe he has better range than displayed at Auburn, then that wouldn't surprise me at all if they're kind of keying in on that, like, hey, we think he can spread the floor a little bit. But at Auburn, he didn't shoot the ball beyond 2 feet from the rim. He had good touch in the paint. The other thing that I think he was really good at is in pick and roll game. When he's the roll man, he's a decent enough screener, big body, 7'1", 7'5" wingspan. He was really good in short roll situations. He could catch the ball, make a quick decision, put the ball on the floor with a couple of strides and get to the basket for a dunk, or he could dish it to somebody in the dunker spot, a cutter along the baseline. He was really good in short roll situations. So, maybe it's a situation where Kessler's Towns backup and you do different, with Nas, the idea was always you could replicate, I don't know, 2/3 of what Karl-Anthony Towns can do offensively. Maybe he's in terms of block rate, a better shot blocker than Karl-Anthony Towns. So you can do some of the same stuff with Nas on the floor as you can with Towns. In this regard, are the Wolves going to completely change their strategy if Kessler's the backup 5? Are they going to switch or play high wall with Towns on the floor defensively and do more, initiating through Towns at the high post or at the elbows when he's on the floor? And when Kessler's on the floor, they run strict pick and roll game and drop coverage defensively. That's possible. And that way you're at least, obviously opposing teams are going to know that immediately, but you're at least making opposing teams adjust to multiple coverages. If you're going to play him with Towns, I think that's feasible, certainly offensively. Towns has effectively played with 5s offensively with Taj Gibson and Gorgie Jang, and even Jared Vanderbilt plays like a 5 offensively. But defensively, I worry about Kessler and Towns together. I worry about how that's going to work. So I don't hate this pick. I know there's a lot of people kind of panning the pick, like, hey, you could have gotten him at 29. He shouldn't even be a first-round pick, some of this stuff. But the block rate's historic. The offensive feel is there in terms of the short roll and the correct decision making. I think that's definitely true. And I don't think we can look past that entirely. So I don't hate this pick. It's just not what I would have done at this spot in the draft, right? Because EJ Liddell was on the board. I would have gone EJ Liddell certainly over Walker Kessler. And there's other things, other players that were on the board at that point that would have been even Ty Washington. I had him. I guess I had Ty Washington just below Kessler on my board, but I didn't think the Wolves would actually pull the trigger on Kessler. I thought that Ty Washington was a more likely pick than Walker than Kessler. So at any rate, Kessler's the pick. It's a bit of a surprising decision by the Timberwolves, but I think we should also underscore the value, as I started by talking about the value that was acquired by Tim Connolly with these additional selections. To this point, the Timberwolves still had their 3 second-round picks. They add another first-round pick. Are they going to trade out of the first round? If they don't, after this pick at 29, I'm going to do another brief live show. We'll do a full YouTube, or a full show on YouTube and all the audio channels here later tonight following the entire draft. But I want to do another live show following their next pick. If they do stand pat at 29, there's always the chance they draft and stash. There's always the chance they trade out of the first round. I really don't think that Tim Connolly and the Timberwolves front office want to go into this season with 2 guaranteed first round contracts on the roster, and they're certainly not going to draft 3 second rounders. So there's going to be some more moves for the Timberwolves here tonight. We're going to break that down. Another live show here in a little bit. I'll tweet out what time that's going to be at to give a reaction, and then we'll also do a full show here later tonight, 30+ minute show regarding the entire draft, any other moves the Timberwolves will make. So all that's going to be upcoming here at the Locked On Wolves YouTube channel. Again, I'll tweet out the link. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Wolves wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow on Twitter at Beecken, and also at Locked On T-Wolves. Don't forget the T. Follow on YouTube, and then also wherever you listen. Also over at all of the Locked On NBA feeds, we're doing reaction with our draft experts tonight. So be sure to check those out if there's any picks you're particularly interested in. Each team is doing shows. I'll be on this channel on YouTube. I'll have the Locked On experts on here shortly to talk about the Timberwolves picks. So be sure to tune into that. I'll see everybody on the live stream here in a little bit. I'll tweet out that link. And